Hi everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're going to be talking about the orchids we received in our last order from the nursery Orchid Garden. It was an order from around 6 months ago, and you can see the unboxing video on our channel, or you can click on the card above.
We wanted to show you a bit of the repotting of the plants and an update on how they're looking right now. We have some good news and some bad news.
The first orchid we unboxed was an Ascocentrum miniatum, a seedling we got 18 months from blooming. As you can see, it arrived completely covered in algae, like a lot of the plants in this order did.
This is the part of the repot that builds up the optimism and makes us think that it's going to be easy to repot every plant we got.
Well, it's especially easy when they're seedlings and they're not very well established. But this one actually had a lot of bark stuck to the roots, and I made the choice to not remove it because the plant didn't have that many roots to begin with. We used peroxide to try and coax the bark out of the roots, but with some of them it just didn't work. We also used peroxide to remove the algae that was stuck on the leaves, and it mostly worked well. I chose to use a medium bark while repotting this plant, but I still put some sphagnum on top for some added moisture, since this plant is a seedling.
The plant has been doing very well. There's roots growing out of the pot and the leaves are developing well.
Next we have Phalaenopsis wilsonii, also covered in algae. A lot of these roots weren't good anymore, so we cut them and cleaned the root system. We did some research, and this Phalaenopsis likes to stay moist, so we ended up using small orchiata bark and added sphagnum to maintain the humidity in the pot.
So far this plant has been doing well. There's new roots growing. We lost a yellow leaf, but we were expecting it. There's still some leftover algae, but it doesn't seem to affect the plant.
The algae that's left, I think it's dead, so it's just like residue on the leaves. Hopefully it doesn't harm the plant. This is a seedling of Cattleya schilleriana, again covered in algae. I started the repot and got startled by a bug in the medium and promptly called him for it to be rescued.
Bug rescue is very frequent when repotting orchids.
Unfortunately, I always get startled. We followed the scared with soaking the plant a little bit to try and loosen the bark stuck to the roots. It took quite a bit of scrubbing with peroxide to be able to get the algae off this one, and still some of it was left behind and turned white, like with the previous Phalaenopsis.
We were surprised by how hard it was to remove the algae from this one, because Cattleyas have such smooth leaves, we thought they would come out much better.
Yeah, but the algae really gets stuck on the leaves.
Although we don't usually add sphagnum to Cattleyas, since this one is a seedling, we did.
And here is this Cattleya nowadays. As you can see, it still has that white leftover on the leaves from the algae. It has grown a couple of roots, but most of the old roots that it came with died off, so I'm pretty sure we're gonna have to baby this for a little bit.
We find that in a lot of our Cattleyas, when we get them and repot them for the first time, they lose roots, so we're not really worried with this one losing its roots. The only worry here is, since it's a seedling, this might affect her growth. Next we have Laelia dayana, another seedling.
Unfortunately, this plant didn't come with many roots, so at least it was easy to repot. We used bark and sphagnum with this one again, not only because it's a seedling, but because we tend to use sphagnum on most of our small Laelias, just so we don't have to water them as frequently.
This plant has been doing great. It got 2 new growths and a bunch of new roots.
Yeah, we're really happy with how this one is doing. This is the beautiful Brassavola cucullata. It arrived in these pots full of compacted sphagnum, which at least has the advantage of being easy to remove from the roots. It came with decent roots, and because of its pendant pseudobulbs, I knew the best option we had was to mount it.
We made these mounts years ago. We actually got the idea from something similar we saw in a video by Brad's greenhouse. They're great because they're a sort of hybrid between a mount and a pot, and they really help keeping the plant moist.
We only have to water them every day in summer. Throughout the year, they usually last 1 to 2 days without having to be watered.
If anyone's interested, we can do a video on them later on.
I usually fill the mount with some bark and then place the orchid on it as best as I can, and then fill the rest with sphagnum. If we're lucky and the orchid has a good enough root system, you can manage to not have to use any type of fishing line or any other type of wire to secure the plant to the mount.
The plant has been doing well. At some point, part of the new growth turned brown, but it kept on developing, so we're just going to keep an eye on it. As for the roots, they've been growing and developing very well.
And as you can see, the plant is now completely attached to the mount, even though we didn't use any type of wire.
Next is Laelia Adrian, a plant I can't see the name of without having Sylvester Stallone's voice in my head.
Some of the older leaves immediately fell off, and even though it looks scary, the plant arrived in really good condition. We potted this one in bark and sphagnum as well, and it seems to be doing really well. It put out a ton of roots. They're even coming out of the bottom of the pot too. While filming, we also found this beautiful new growth, so we couldn't be happier with this plant. This Phalaenopsis arrived a little bit dehydrated, so we knew immediately that when we repot it, we'd have to be very careful with the root system. The root system wasn't very extensive, so I knew I had to be even more careful with this plant while repotting.
This plant also came with a flower spike that we had to be very careful not to damage while repotting.
Sometimes when there's a big gap in the medium when you're repotting, I like to put a little sphagnum through the ventilation holes to try and fill those spaces up. This most recent leaf kept growing, but at some point the edges got softer and slightly red, so I was afraid some type of rot was happening. It now seems to have recovered, so I guess it was nothing special.
Unfortunately, this plant lost its flower spike, which is something we don't really mind as long as the plant recovers well.
The root system is looking really good too. This plant was sold at the time as Phalaenopsis venosa crossed with lindenii, but afterwards I saw on the seller's website that it actually has a registered name, and it's called Phalaenopsis Helene Burkhardt. Aerangis mystacidii arrived not looking great aesthetically, but I think it was okay overall. The bottom leaves fell off immediately and it didn't have too many roots. Since this is a plant that needs a bit more of an aerated media, we decided to use medium bark.
This plant has been doing great. Apart from the older leaves, which don't look as good just because of the algae, the root system has been developing really well, the new leaves are growing beautifully, and we've had no problems keeping it hydrated, even in looser media. When we received the Dendrobium parishii, it was just about time for it to enter its winter rest. But since some of the plants had bug in the media, we decided to repot it either way.
This turned out to be two separate plants, which actually helped in the arduous task of cleaning a root system of a Dendrobium. And it's a good thing we decided to repot because there you go, another bug in the medium. And of course another rescue mission. For this Dendrobium, we used mostly bark with a little bit of sphagnum to help in the summer.
After the repot, we watered it a couple more times and let it enter its winter rest. There wasn't much of an update for this plant. It lost some leaves and it looked a bit dehydrated. Okay. Then we spotted something developing in two of the canes, so new growth is coming.
This gorgeous plant arrived in really good condition, even though it came in a pot full of compacted sphagnum.
We went with the usual bark and sphagnum mix. We expected the plant to lose some roots because of how different the media was, but since she had such a good looking root system, we weren't very concerned.
And here she is now. Not only did it not resent the drastic medium change, it soon developed a flower spike. The plant is still looking good, it made plenty of roots, and the flowers, of course, are amazing. It barely has any scent, but with blooms like these, who cares? This plant, when it arrived, looked just as good as the previous one, and it came just as full of sphagnum. We decided to repot them the same way with sphagnum and bark.
We used to hate these soft pots, but lately the plants that arrive in soft pots and compacted sphagnum have been doing really well for us, and have been arriving with a great root system.
Right now the plant is still looking amazing. It developed more roots. No flower spike yet, but as long as the plants are healthy, I'm not complaining. Now this plant, as I mentioned in a previous video, was my dream plant, my most wished for plant, the reason I even got this order, and I was so happy to have one. Although there was something about the plant itself that reminded me of Phalaenopsis, the way that it has a lot of leaves and a lot of flower spikes, it reminded me of Phalaenopsis, which is a plant I've had twice, and twice they've died on me. So that wasn't a very good omen. And even now, looking at the repotting footage, I can see nothing wrong with what I did, or I can't think of anything wrong that I did with the care I gave it afterwards, but I can tell you right now that the plant didn't make it. It started to lose the bottom leaves after about a month, and since it had so many leaves and it looked healthy to begin with, I didn't think much of it. Then it was a flower spike that dried, and I thought it was just acclimating and sacrificing one of the flower spikes, so I didn't think any of it. Then more leaves starting to yellow, and all the flower spikes started to go soft, and the way it was declining really quickly, it became very apparent that what it had was stem rot.
It's interesting because even though I can't understand what we did wrong, this was the exact same process we went through with both of our Mariae.
Yes, and after a little bit of internet research, I think they're closely related, so maybe there's something that I'm doing wrong with the care, or maybe this is just a plant that has a tendency for stem rot, or just to quickly decline every time something goes wrong with its care. At this point, we had decided to take it out of the pot and clean everything that we could, clean up the stem, remove some of the old leaves, and expose the rotten part. The roots at this point were completely gone, so we just cut them off. We tried to clean all the visible black from the stem and apply cinnamon, but it was no use. The plant ended up declining and dying either way. This plant arrived, as you can see, with a cut leaf that was turning yellow, and in the beginning I didn't think too much of it. The rest of the plant looked okay, and when we unpotted it, so did the roots. I ended up later on cutting the yellow leaf because at some point the dark spots started to spread. And then the dried up part of the leaf that touched the stem recently started to turn dark again, so I had to rip it off and apply some cinnamon to stop it from spreading deeper into the plant. I'm not completely confident I got all of it, but we're gonna have to see how it goes.
The plant came mounted in cork without any sphagnum, which just doesn't work in our hot summers. After unmounting it, we realized there was actually two plants, one of them very small. Neither of them had a very good root system.
We decided to use another one of our DIY mounts. I tried to get the two plants fixed to the mount with just the sphagnum, but because they didn't have many roots, I had to use some fishing line to attach them better later on. And here we have the plant now. As you can see, like many of the other plants, it also has that white residue from the dead algae, but the new growth is growing really nice and strong. It's also much bigger than the other pseudobulbs, which makes me think that even though this plant was sold as big enough to flower, I don't think it was quite an adult plant yet. You can also see the roots are growing really well. So that's how this order of plants is doing so far.
This was our first time ordering from Orchid Garden, and overall the experience was good. The plants all arrived in good condition and the shipping was fast. After making our video, we've heard about people in our orchid community having bad experiences while ordering from them, so that's something to keep in mind.
Yes, and I'm also a bit sad about the 2 Phalaenopsis that developed some type of rot a little bit after arriving. Of course, these things can happen, and they have happened to us with other sellers. And I can't discount that I could have done something wrong with them. So overall, I'm still really happy we got this order.
We hope you enjoyed our video, and if you did, it would mean the world to us if you would like the video and subscribe to our channel.
Goodbye!